What's the most wholesome experience you've had with a stranger?
I was in the hospital, knowing I'd be there for at least a week, and possibly more. I was sick of hospital food, so I went downstairs to go across the street to the hospital subway. I was pretty far back in the hospital's 6th floor, backside of the building, labyrinth of staircases and hallways to get out the front door. The walk from there to subway took almost 15 minutes, even though it was just across the street. I waited in line, got up to the counter to order, and realized I'd left my wallet in my room. I ordinarily keep my wallet in my back pocket, but there was no need to be in the hospital since I was in my room most of the time. I was exhausted mentally by that point from the stay, told them I'd forgotten the wallet, and turned to make the trek all the way there and back again. All of a sudden, a nurse behind me bought my food for me, saving me the trip and the money. I thanked him profusely. That was years ago, but I will never forget that act of kindness.
I was traveling from the south of England to the north of Scotland to start a new job the next morning. I had taken a train up to London and was supposed to get on an early morning flight from Heathrow. The bus to the airport, however, was cancelled and I had to make my own way using a series of night buses. However, it was about 2:30 a.m. and my phone was dead, and I had never used London's night buses before. I was young and a little scared, standing in the middle of Victoria trying to figure out the fated bus schedule when a woman came up to me and asked, "Are you alright, love?" And I explained through tears that I thought I was going to miss my flight and didn't even have an Oyster card. She looked up my route on her phone, wrote down all the possible variations of buses and trains that I would need to take, including the times. She waited with me the entire time, like 20 minutes, then when the bus came up she paid for my fare, no cash on London buses. I got out and looked at her and she shrugged and said, "Oh, I'm not getting the bus, you just looked like you needed someone." I think about her every once in a while, and I'm incredibly grateful for her.
I was in an abusive relationship and it ended with him beating me up very badly. Broken ribs, bruises and cuts all over me. He was arrested, but the process and aftermath was hell. It was spring and the weather was warming, but for weeks I wore long sleeves and high collars to hide the cuts and bruises. Eventually everything healed and faded except one very deep bruise on my upper arm. I had had enough of hiding them in shame, so one day I said fuck it and wore short sleeves. I was standing in line in Walmart and noticed this rough biker looking dude staring at me. I thought he was checking me out or whatever. Then he asked me how I got that bruise on my arm. I stumbled answering and he outright asked, "Did somebody hurt you?" For some reason I decided to be honest and not lie in shame, so I said out loud, "Yes, somebody hurt me." He looked at me and in the kindest voice said, "You did not deserve that. Whoever it was will get what's due to them one day." For some reason, that was a turning point for me. I knew then that I was going to be okay. I knew that no matter how things turned out legally, that I was going to be okay. I never saw that man again, but I honestly think he was an angel sent to give me a message.
My card declined at a fast food place a couple years ago. The manager saw it happening and came up and gave me the food anyway. It may have come from a fuck this establishment mood rather than the unrelenting kindness of his heart, but either way it really made my day.
I went once to a supermarket to buy some groceries for my last week in college. I was about to pay when I realized I had forgotten my wallet, so I told the cashier I would leave everything and come back in about an hour. I lived like 20 minutes away from the store. A man in a nice suit who was behind me on the line heard the conversation and said he would pay for me. I was too surprised with it and first gently denied his offer, but he insisted and just handed his card to the cashier and wished me a good day.
This happened when I was around 9 or 10. I was out riding my bike with my mum, and halfway through the trail, my bike broke down. Anyway, we couldn't carry the bike back home since it would take hours, so we were just stranded in that field. There were a few people on the trail who saw our inconvenience, but either they didn't have any bike knowledge to know how to fix it, or they couldn't be bothered to care. At least an hour had passed before this old man, and I mean like a real old man, he looked to be around 80, approached us and fixed our bike free of charge. He got his hands down to the grease, and eventually after a few minutes I could start pedaling again. I thought that was a really wholesome moment, his kindness and coolness to our situation. And that's why this memory sticks to me, I guess. Once we went out to a restaurant for a meal. Earlier the same day we found out that one of my partner's relatives, someone they were close to, had killed themselves. We thought it would be a good idea to get out of the house and distract ourselves. Our waitress was lovely and spoke to us throughout the meal, as it was quiet and she seemed fun. At the end of the meal, and many wines, my partner was visibly emotional, not crazy, just sad looking. The waitress asked us if we were okay, and saw that my partner was upset. So she asked again. We told her what had happened. She was shocked and it was obvious she really felt for my partner. A few minutes later, she came over with some limoncello shots and said it's on the house, which was unexpected and lovely. We protested a bit, but she said, I'm managing tonight. It's little things like this that make me like working here, because I can make your night a bit better. What a legend. It gets even more lovely though. We asked her for the bill shortly after, and when it arrived, it read £00.00. She had discounted the whole bill, putting it through as wastage. We were shocked and had a tearful goodbye with her after many protests, and finding it unbelievable. We'd had a 3-course meal, wine and beer, loads of sides. We went to town and she just covered it because my partner was sad. I'll remember it forever. She could have kept herself to herself and ignored us, but that moment of kindness meant too much to us that day and turned it from a shitty day to a less shitty day.
When my choir went to a festival in Italy, 3 of us went out to dinner very late one night after the festival ended. We were the last people in the restaurant, and we made sure to ask several times if it was okay for us to be there so late.
The waiter taking care of us, we learned, was actually the owner, and the bartender/chef was her husband. They were super nice to us, putting up with our bad Italian, and when we didn't like the wine we chose, offering us a different bottle without any extra charge. After the meal, we stopped by the bar where they were cleaning up, to offer compliments on the very good food and thank them again, and they asked why we were in Italy. On hearing we were in a choir, they said, "Ooh, you sing something? We give you shots." So of course we busted out in 3-part harmony, and they gave us a couple of shots of limoncello each, on the house, the first I'd ever tasted limoncello, and the first shot I'd ever done. And that's the story of the time we didn't sing for our supper, but sang for our drinks. I've had a soft spot for limoncello ever since.
I once took my son to a local science center for a day of fun. I also have cerebral palsy. I get around well enough. Sometimes I use a wooden cane, but I'm alright unsupported. I rock a mean limp and have terrible balance, but if you were to see me walking around, most would just assume I had been injured at some point. While walking around, I spotted this woman with a young daughter of maybe 7 to 8 using a walker and sporting a pair of leg braces. The mother and I locked eyes a few times throughout our free roaming day until eventually our kids started interacting with the same exhibit. We were standing there watching them and I turned to the mother and before I could even speak she said, "Cerebral palsy. You too, huh?" We ended up spending the rest of our day together chatting about our lives and experiences and going over the many advancements and therapies that have been developed since my childhood. She ended up telling me at the end of the day that seeing me being a single dad to my son and being so independent in spite of my disability gave her a lot of peace of mind. She said she worried a lot about what her daughter's future might hold in terms of her independence. It was just an all-around really nice experience.
I had a knock on my door and when I opened it, there was a stranger with a gift card to a local garden store for me. Apparently her kid had been pinching tulips from my garden every day to give to his mom and they wanted to pay for them, once they figured out whose garden they were coming from. I had thought squirrels were doing it and had regretted planting them the year before, not being able to enjoy them. I spent the gift card on more bulbs.
There was a little girl who lived a street away when I was growing up. I think she was around my sister's age. One day my mom spotted her watching her garden and complimented the tulips, before riding off again on her bike. My mom went back inside for something, or maybe to a different part of the garden, but just for a moment. When she got back, she discovered the tulips were gone and spotted the little girl biking away really fast. My mom chased her down and the girl said she took them because they were pretty. My mom scolded her and said if she'd only asked, my mom would have been happy to cut some tulips for her. She didn't sweat it too much, because they were a poor family with many kids, who all got into a lot of trouble around the neighborhood. They were just flowers after all. A few years later the girl was diagnosed with leukemia and ended up dying. I think she was 11 or 12. My mom was so troubled by the death, she got permission from the family to plant some tulips by her grave, so she'd always have the flowers she loved.
I moved 1,000 miles away from everything I knew after graduating college 16 years ago. Back then I was pretty homesick, struggling in my career and figuring things out, so I felt pretty lost in life. One day I was walking around downtown Orlando when an older man, probably in his mid-80s, stopped me. He handed a piece of paper that he was carrying to me and said, "You seem like a good person with a good heart. It will be all right." Then he just walked away. Looking down, that piece of paper was a copy of a handwritten page by him filled with dozens and dozens of sayings, illustrations and quotes from all over the world regarding love and hope. Tears came immediately and I put it away to read later that day. It stayed on my wall in my home for the better part of 10 years until I moved again. Now it's been 16 years since then, and sure, he's moved on to the next world by now. I still have that page, take it out occasionally and think about that wonderful man from many years ago who taught me about pure and genuine random acts of kindness right along with love and hope. He was an absolute blessing to me and to our world. Thank you, good sir. You were a beautiful soul. Remember, no matter what happens in our lives, hope and love will always prevail. Hugs.